Loud and Clear.
Welcome back to Loud and Clear. I'm John Kiriakou in studio with my co-host Brian Becker. Environmental groups yesterday argued in a federal appeals court that the Environmental Protection Agency should revoke its approval of a potent weed killer because it evaporates quickly, destroys nearby crops, and kills wildlife. The groups say that Monsanto's XtendiMax weed killer is a health hazard and should be banned immediately. We're joined from Virginia by Alexis Baden-Mayer, the political director for Organic Consumers Alliance. Alexis, welcome.
Thank you.
Alexis, tell us about this XtendiMax. I had never heard of it really until I started to research this segment. And this is a very, very potent weed killer that also can kill people.
That's right. Now, Monsanto has had somewhat of a failure with its glyphosate-based Roundup herbicides. The big failure that is hurting them in the marketplace right now is that it's created superweeds. So farmers, they were promised this weed-free system. You spray our herbicide, you can spray it all the time. You'll never have to deal with and worry about weeds. Well, it just wasn't the case. The weeds adapt quickly, and now there are super weeds. You can spray as much Roundup on them as you want, but the weeds keep coming back. And this is a huge economic concern for farmers, and they've been complaining to Monsanto. So Monsanto goes back to these older herbicides, which, if you can believe something more dangerous than glyphosate, which we know causes cancer, we've got things like Dicamba. And that's what the XtendiMax is, this idea that we'll just go back to an older, more dangerous herbicide, one that also can quickly vaporize and destroy neighboring crops. So what they're in big trouble with farmers right now is that in 2017, in just 1 year, 3.6 million acres of soybeans and other crops in 25 states were destroyed because of their use of Dicamba herbicide drifting on to crops that don't have that GMO protection of being Dicamba resistant.
I want to ask you about this Dicamba because this came up in a lot of different articles I looked at, and it reminds me of those old stories about rats in New York City, that the city began putting poison out in whenever it was, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the rats became almost immune to the poison, to the point where by the 1980s and 1990s, the rats were dying when they couldn't get the poison to eat. Is that what we're seeing here with these superweeds?
Nearly. I haven't heard that the weeds need the herbicide to survive. But it's pretty close. I mean, certainly, the farmers are needing to use more and more dangerous insecticides and herbicides with this pesticide treadmill that companies like Monsanto have created for their own profit, knowing that eventually one technology will have to be replaced with a new technology, and they'll have multiple products that farmers are reliant on.
So what are we looking at here in terms of direct threats to the health of humans? We know that this chemical evaporates very quickly. We know that it's extraordinarily potent. It damages nearby crops. It kills wildlife. Let's talk about the short-term consequences and the long-term consequences.
Well, certainly you can die from exposure to extreme amounts of Dicamba. But also, like with other pesticides, it's a cancer risk. You can have reproductive and developmental problems in babies that are born to people exposed to Dicamba. So it's very similar to the risks of many pesticides where we have long-term health problems, and obviously you can, farm workers regularly die because of exposure to extreme amounts of pesticides.
I'm looking at a piece that ran in Reuters today. It says the United States has faced a weed killer crisis caused by the new formulations of Dicamba-based herbicides, which farmers and weed experts say have harmed crops because they evaporate and drift away. The EPA's declaration that XtendiMax would have no effect on plants and animals was arbitrary and capricious, according to Paul Achitoff, a lawyer for the nonprofit Earth Justice. He was talking to a 3-judge panel at the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Seattle. Monsanto, of course, spends millions and millions of dollars on lobbying and on law firms all around the country to push these approvals through. It's interesting to me that this case has gotten to the appellate level. The only next step is the Supreme Court. How do you see this issue playing out?
Well, I think this has just created such a disaster for farmers that courts are going to have to step in. Supposedly this GMO and pesticide technology is supposed to feed the world, right? It's supposed to ever increase our ability to produce food. I argue with that, of course, because most of the so-called food that's being produced is used as ethanol, food for animals in factory farms, producing ingredients like high fructose corn syrup. So I take issue with that whole feed the world stance, but at least in practice, it's supposed to make money for farmers. And when you have a product that's so dangerous in terms of its environmental impact, destroying neighboring fields and fields, more than a mile away, you have an economic crisis for farmers, one that courts can't easily ignore, the way that the human health risks have been ignored up until the point that we got the Monsanto lawsuits from our first Roundup exposed cancer victim who was victorious in the courts against Monsanto and just recently got a $289 million judgment because of his exposure to Roundup and getting non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So we're starting to see a little bit of justice here for individuals harmed by these products. But when you've got thousands of farmers across the country, conventional farmers in the industrialized food system who are being damaged by Monsanto, I can't imagine that the courts would be able to ignore that. I'm surprised that politicians are ignoring that. That doesn't seem like a wise choice on their part.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Alexis, I wanted to ask you specifically about dicamba. Dicamba was developed because some weeds became resistant to glyphosate, as you said at the beginning of this segment. So both have been developed by Monsanto. It seems only logical then that when weeds become resistant to dicamba, Monsanto is going to try to create something even more potent. Is there a way to stop this vicious cycle where we're going to end up just simply poisoning ourselves?
Well, yes. In fact, many farmers produce nutritious, abundant food organically. You can go into any grocery store in the United States today. Walmart has become the biggest seller of organics. We've got Costco. All of the major grocery stores are selling organic food. And while it's still something of a niche market, we haven't reached market saturation. But consumers want it. Certainly, most consumers are buying organic whenever it's available and whenever they can afford it. And we've got some issues around that because we subsidize industrial agriculture and make the junk food cheap where the organic vegetables are far more expensive. So we've got some food justice issues that we obviously need to deal with. But there's another way that's been proven and just even proven in the American marketplace.
We're speaking with Alexis Baden-Mayer. She is the political director for Organic Consumers Alliance. Now that we're on the topic of organic foods, tell us about your organization and how people can get involved. And let me add, too, that I always stayed away from organic foods only because of the price. And finally, I started, making a little bit of money, and I moved over to organic. And I have to tell you, the difference is dramatic. Organic milk, organic meats, for example. The taste is better. The shelf life is longer. It's a complete difference, and my kids are in love with organic foods. So tell us about your organization and how people can get better involved.
Well, we're the Organic Consumers Association. You can find us at organicconsumers.org, and you can find Organic Consumers Association on Facebook, Twitter, etc., all social media channels. And we're actively looking for activists who want to communicate with their members of Congress, their school boards and school districts about the use of pesticides. So if this issue grabs you, we need you in our network working on this. We've got this golden opportunity now that the courts are finally recognizing the human health harms and the harms that are economic harms to farmers, the problems with these products that Monsanto has made money from for so long. We've got this opportunity now to act, and we have to take it to the political realm. So if you're interested, contact me. I'm Alexis at organicconsumers.org.
Fantastic. I want to echo that point, too. We don't have to go just to the courts. We can go to Capitol Hill and lobby our members of Congress. Remember, they work for us, and they are actually responsive. We're out of time. We were joined from Virginia by Alexis Baden-Mayer. She's the political director for Organic Consumers Association. You've been listening to Loud and Clear. Be sure to go to our Facebook page, Loud and Clear with Brian Becker, for daily updates. If you enjoy the show and want your friends to hear it, let us know by liking the page on Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter at Loud Clear Radio. You can also hear us every day, Monday through Friday, from 4 to 6 p.m. on 105.5 FM and 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. You can hear us at SputnikNews.com and as a podcast at iTunes and at iHeartRadio, and now at Spotify. Remember, telling the truth is important, but to make a difference, it has to be loud and clear. We'll see you next time.
Loud and Clear.